So here I am getting busted. I am being put under arrest for possession of marijuana. What a drag. You got to be kidding me. All I was doing was smoking a joint with a couple of friends. What's the big deal? I only had a few grams of pot in a baggie. Not even $10 worth. Less than a dime. Now what's going to happen? Am I going to get a fine? Are they going to put me in jail overnight? I really don't know. What if my parents find out? You would think the cops would have better things to do with their time than busting good people like me. I've never been in trouble with the law before. Not for anything in my entire life. This is all bullshit. In fact, that cop set me up. He tricked me. This is entrapment. Let me tell you what happened. Listen to this. Here's the story. Some friends and I were at the Richmond Inn. It's a bar in Richmond Hill. We called it the Inn. All my friends go there. Every weekend the place was packed. Sometimes you would see people there you haven't seen in ages. And sometimes the same old crowd. No matter who was there, you were always guaranteed a good time. The Inn was right on the main drag of Richmond Hill. Both the Richmond Inn and the Cop Shop were on Yonge St. The Cop Shop was in the middle of the strip about 1/2 mile from the Inn. The Richmond Inn was in the south end of the strip just north of Major Mackenzie Drive. Yonge Street runs straight through the middle of Richmond Hill. In the 1970s the main drag ran from Major Mackenzie Drive in the south to Elgin Mills Road in the north. It's a lot longer than that today. The parking lot for the Richmond Inn was huge. It went from Yonge Street in the front through to Church Street in the back. The back door of the inn was about halfway down the parking lot. It was right in the center between Yonge and Church. It was dark. There weren't many lights. A perfect place to smoke a joint. You could stand off in the shadows and no one would notice you back there. Or so that is what we all thought. I was standing in a circle of friends. We were all having a toke. I had just finished rolling a joint and I still had a bag of pot in my hand. The joint had been lit up and was making its way around the circle. We were all talking and carrying on. We weren't paying attention to our surroundings. Maybe we should have been more aware of what was going on around us. The cop came out of nowhere. Suddenly there he was, right beside us in full uniform. He must have seen us from Yonge Street while on foot patrol. Or maybe he was checking out the parking lot and saw our group. He may have even smelt a pot and decided to investigate. What he did was sneak up on us in the dark and appear out of nowhere. He stepped up to our group and said, "What's going on here?" Then he stepped forward and turned on his flashlight. Right away I dropped my hand holding the baggie to my side. Then I flicked the bag onto the ground behind me. Almost at once the cop found the baggie of pot with his flashlight beam. He must have seen me drop it. He pointed the flashlight at it and said to me, "What is that?" By now I had the cops' full attention and everybody else seemed to have melted away. I think a couple of them may have stood back in the shadows just to see what was going to happen. When the cop pointed his flashlight at the baggie on the ground he asked me, "What is that?" I answered, "I don't know." He then said, "Hand it to me." So stupid me. I did just that. I bent over, picked up the baggie and handed it over to him. He said, "You're under arrest for possession of marijuana." Talk about being stupid. That was the dumbest thing I could have done. The moment I picked up that bag, I was in possession of marijuana, and he had me dead to rights. All I had to do was not touch that baggie and there would have been nothing he could have done. So now do you see how he set me up? He tricked me into picking up the bag of pot just by simply saying, "Hand it to me," and I was the idiot who fell for it and did what he asked me to do. That's how he entrapped stupid me. Now you might say, "But it was your pot in the first place, and you're the one who dropped it on the ground." You can point that out to me, and it is all true, but it does not matter. It was not in my possession, not until I picked it up and held it in my hand. That is when it became my property. The cop, whom from now on will be known as Officer Bob or just Bob, I'm sorry, I don't remember his real name. This all happened nearly 50 years ago in 1973. Officer Bob asked me for my identification. I gave it to him. He looked at it and he kept it. He took me by the upper arm and escorted me out of the parking lot. Officer Bob was on foot patrol. Him and I were now going to walk together side by side back to the police station along Yonge Street. The police station was in the center of town, about a half-mile walk. Growing up my parents taught me manners and respect. I always thought of myself as a nice guy and easy to get along with, not an asshole. Although by no stretch of the imagination could you call Officer Bob and I friends. I did treat Bob with respect, and in return he treated me with respect as well. I think we may have talked a bit on the walk to the police station. I remember I was not handcuffed. I asked him what he would do if I took off running. He said nothing. I have your ID. I had nothing to say to that. I remember what worried me most while walking to the cop shop was what would happen if someone I knew saw me walking down the street side by side with a cop, just like we were good buddies. I didn't want rumors to start that I was a narc, an informer. When we got to the police station, Bob took me into the main office. There were a couple of plainclothes detectives in the office. When Bob and I came in, they both looked up from their desks. One of them said to Bob, "What have you got here, Bob?" Bob said to him, "Don't worry, he's okay." Officer Bob took me into another part of the station where I was processed for possession of marijuana. I received a summons to appear with a court date, then I was released. I can't help but think that the detective who asked Bob, "What do you have here?" may have had some rough stuff in mind. Why else would Officer Bob say, "Don't worry, he's okay"? And that is a quote. That is exactly what Officer Bob said. I may have forgotten Officer Bob's real name or what friends I was with at night, but I will never forget what Officer Bob said back to the detective. In those days there were lots of rumors of long-haired types just like me, being roughed up by the police, and sometimes hurt. I'm glad that Officer Bob thought I was okay and said so. 2 months later I went to court in Newmarket. I pled guilty and received a conditional discharge and a $50 fine.